Alright, so I thought I would come on here and actually talk about some of the work that I'm doing. It dawned on me a while back, I think about a year ago, where I did a commentary on my work. It seems to work out better sometimes because I can kind of go through the process a little more succinctly. So here we go. When the shower has been prepped, which this one has, and I've already done the floor and grouted it, which this one has, you notice a cardboard that I put at the bottom. Cardboard is there obviously to protect the tile from all the slop that I do and tile getting chipped and things like that. So the prep is done, and now I'm on to starting to do the walls. Ledger boards. I started doing ledger boards some years ago. I just found it much easier. I can start running all my tile all the way to the ceiling on day one, and then I can come back and do the last tile at the bottom some other time. So basically what I'm doing is I'm figuring out on here exactly where my center is at, so I can start doing my center tile, measuring out the center, making that mark, and then eventually I'll mark my tile center so that I can do even cuts on both left and right side. And there's where I'm measuring my tile center. Not all tile is created equal. A lot of it is, instead of 24 left to right, it'll be 23 and 7/8, or it'll be 23 and 3/4, or in a lot of cases lately they just shave that number almost to 11. Most of the tile I've dealt with lately, oddly enough, is not 12 by 24 but 11 1/4 by 23 1/4, which kind of throws off all my lines on an 8-foot ceiling especially. Anyway, getting back to the ledger boards, basically I'm just screwing those into the wall using sheetrock screws, and I prefer a good pine 1x, because 1x is very straight as opposed to some of the cheaper 1x's that you would use for construction purposes. So those are 1x's. That one you see at the front there was actually tapered down through a table saw at one time, and that's why you see that kind of odd cut at the bottom. When I put my levels on those boards, as you saw earlier, I'm getting them as level as possible, and I'm cross-referencing with my laser level that you see there. My laser level will set right on the top of that board, but I also use my levels. So the leveling of those boards is going to be contingent on how well your tile is leveled, obviously, and that's another good reason to use those boards, so that you're basically level to begin with. Now, if you notice here, I think I'll show it, I'm still putting my level on to make sure that everything's straight, flat, flush, plumb, and sometimes I'll have to put little spacers, and anything can be a spacer. I think in this case I'm actually using the smaller, the Quip, the cheesy Quip leveling clips that I had bought. They come with also the shims, and I use the shims for leveling out individual tile. So not all tile are necessarily rectified. Rectified meaning every single tile matches every single tile, and you don't have to worry about any discrepancy. And most tile aren't like that, and I know for sure these aren't. And so that's the reason that I have to kind of manipulate my tile as I go along and use little spacers and little not leveling clips, but what I said earlier about the wedges. I'll use wedges, I'll use screws, I'll use another small pieces of tile, anything at my disposal. There I go, all right? See that little leveling shim, that yellow one you see down there by my waist. And so that's how I get those tile, especially on the first row. As you go up incrementally each row, you're going to have to do that also if you don't have a good quality tile. As a rule, leveling clips will make sure that you're flush and plumb and all those things that we're trying to attain, but not always. And so I always recommend using both the laser and levels. I kind of cross-reference against them to see which one kind of works out the best, and they're usually pretty on point. I have a stability level, which are typically pretty good, but they get beat up sometimes, so I don't count on those exclusively. which is part and parcel to the reason I have a laser on there. And obviously I'm doing my measurement again because here's where the next cuts come in at the halfway mark on the tile that I've already set. Anyway, let me get on to the tiling part, specifically on the thin set. So what I'm using here, I believe, is a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch notched trowel, which on a large format tile you want to use. There are some guys who prefer to do their buttering on the wall rather than on the tile, and I do it the other way. So the buttering goes on my tile, and then I trowel out onto my wall. But you could do it the other way around. At the end of the day, what you're trying to obtain is about somewhere between, in an ideal world, about 85 to 90% to 100% coverage on any given tile on a wall. You're trying to obtain that, but that's the real world. Well, that's what we're trying to obtain in the real world, but obviously in the real world we're not really getting that. If you take an individual tile off the wall after you've set it up there with all this thin set on it, you'll have a pretty good idea of how well things are moving along, and just repeat that process over and over, and you'll be good. It's not that difficult to get that kind of coverage. The troweling that I do, as I'm watching this, I notice that my troweling is going in an upward fashion, and the reason I do that instead of elongated left to right, because I have a 12 by 24 tile, and when you push your tile against those ridges, what you're trying to do is collapse those ridges, and thereby getting as much thin set both on the tile and your wall, so that you're getting that 90%, 100% coverage. It's a lot easier for that air to escape as you collapse those ridges in a short fashion, in other words, top to bottom, that 12, than it would be left to right, 24. And that's the reason that I make my ridges that way as opposed to the other way. So pretty common sense. What I also do, and I don't know if I'm going to show it here, where that niche is, the bottom of the niche, as I go up from row to row, I'm checking not only my level with levels and lasers and all that stuff, but I'm also checking the distance. It's just something that I kind of enjoy doing, because I like to see that the left and right of my niche, at that edge there of the niche, to the next row of tile, both left and right, is exactly the same measurement. So for example, if we were doing the measurement and I was at 13 1/4 on that right side of the niche down to that bottom of the tile, and I was 13 1/4 on the left side of the niche, that's a happy day. If I'm 13 1/8 and 13 1/4, then I might make some slight adjustments as I go up the rows. I also like doing that to the ceiling. So by the time I get up to about this waist level, I usually take a measurement from the ceiling to the right side, far right side of my tile, and the far left side of the tile. And I enjoy the fact that that measurement's pretty spot on, although ceilings aren't always level, so there's that too. So as I get up to this third row now, you see I'm using, when you put these clips in, you don't want them boogered up with all the thin set, because it makes it really, really difficult to knock those clips out the next day. So that's why you take a margin trowel, or actually anything, even a sheetrock blade or something like that, and you just kind of screed out all that thin set right where you're putting the clips at, so that you don't booger up the clips, because they're really bare to get out the next day if you don't do that with the thin set and all that stuff. Plus, the plastic embeds in them, and then you got to get a razor knife and all that stuff. A little difficult. On this particular application, I was about 1/2 inch shy of hitting my mark, because I was trying to get the tile right up to the niche, and it almost worked out. So I had to manipulate that a little bit later on in order to get my Schluter strip, because that's what I ended up framing out the niche with, is Schluter edging the profile. So you'll see that at the end of the video. And manipulating that last 1/2 inch is only because this tile was 11 1/4. Now I could have done something different. You know, rather than making my mark at that ledger board from that very bottom row that I'll do later on at, you know, that 11.5 mark or 11.75 mark. Well, in this case, it would have been 11. I could have made my mark, say, at 9 inches, or any number really, in order to get, you know, a full tile at the top. And I could have gone in half. I could have gone at 6 inches at the very bottom tile, but I didn't. So sometimes the pre-planning, no, strike that. A lot of times the pre-planning will dictate where your tile falls. And in this case, I was just shy of where I wanted it to go. But it's all good. It worked out, and you'll see at the end. So we're just moving along, and it's the same thing. Going up from this row, it's the same thing that I was doing earlier, all the way up to the ceiling, and it'll be the same thing on the left and the right wall as well. So hopefully some of these tips doing the commentary as you're watching the work will help you in your project, which is the reason I do the videos. Yep, that's it. It is finished. Looking different because the other one was like a light brown, tannish, and this one is a gray. So it turned out good. I like it. Do the same thing, taper cuts on the edge. Do the same thing with the golf ball. You know, make sure, well, I already did this before. Make sure I got a good slope. I got a quartz top on here, which works out well because there's really nothing that matches with this. New shower valve and this little wand fixture, which I like. I like the other one better because it's got the magnetic back on it, and the rounded sluiter on the edge, straight sluiter on both left and right. I don't paint, so they got to come in with a painter to have that done. I set a new toilet, I put in new faucets, and I think that's all he wants me to do. So anyway, I'm on to the next project. This one is in the bag. Hey, if you enjoyed that video and you learned something, consider being a Patreon member. $5, $10, $15 a month would help me greatly produce more videos. I make nothing from YouTube at all. If you're gonna call me for advice, please donate $50 for 30 minutes. My link to my PayPal and my Patreon account is down below. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell so you get immediate notifications as soon as I post videos. And thank you very much for your support.